The galaxy was old. Very, very old. Thousands of species had risen from their home worlds, learned to build ships, and joined the great community of stars. They had formed councils and alliances. They had fought wars and made peace. They had mapped nearly every corner of known space and believed they understood how the universe worked. Then they discovered humans. At first, no one paid much attention to the small blue planet called Earth. It was young. Its people were primitive, and they had only recently learned to leave their own atmosphere. The great species of the galaxy watched with mild interest as humans sent their first clumsy rockets into space, built their first space stations, and eventually constructed ships that could travel between stars. "Give them a few thousand years," the Valorians said. "Perhaps they will become interesting." "They fight among themselves constantly," the Corvani observed. "They will probably destroy themselves before they mature." "Curious creatures," the Xanthari noted, "but ultimately unremarkable." This was the common opinion of humanity across the galaxy. They were newcomers, children really, stumbling around in a universe they did not understand. No one expected anything special from them. No one imagined that these strange, soft-skinned beings from a violent little world would soon teach the galaxy something it had forgotten long ago. The story began on an ordinary day aboard the cargo ship Dawnbreaker. Commander Nyla Voss sat in her chair on the bridge, drinking her third cup of coffee and reviewing the shipping manifests for their current haul. The Dawnbreaker was not a fancy ship. It was old, patched in a dozen places, and made strange noises when it accelerated too fast. But it was hers, and she loved it the way a person loves something they have worked hard to earn. Her crew was small but loyal. Danny Callahan served as her first officer, a tall man with kind eyes and a quick laugh who had been with her since the beginning. Rosa Martinez was the chief engineer, a genius with machines who could fix anything with enough time and coffee. Kevin Huang handled the piloting, his steady hands guiding them through asteroid fields and space stations with equal skill. And Tammy Brooks served as their medical officer, though on a cargo ship. She spent most of her time treating minor injuries and reminding everyone to eat properly. They were hauling agricultural equipment to a colony on the outer rim, a boring but profitable job. Nyla expected an uneventful journey. The universe, however, had other plans. "Commander," Kevin said suddenly, his voice sharp with surprise. "I'm picking up a signal." "What kind of signal?" Nyla asked, setting down her coffee. "Distress beacon. It's coming from the Cygnus Rift." The bridge went silent. Everyone knew about the Cygnus Rift. It was a region of space that ships avoided at all costs. Radiation storms swept through it without warning. Gravitational anomalies could tear a vessel apart in seconds. The few ships that had entered it over the centuries had never returned. It was, quite simply, one of the most dangerous places in the known galaxy. "Can you clean up the signal?" Nyla asked. Kevin worked at his console for a moment, and then a voice filled the bridge. It was fragmented, broken by static, but the fear in it was unmistakable. "This is the Valorian research vessel Starweaver. We have suffered catastrophic hull damage. Life support is failing. We have 37 souls aboard, including 12 younglings. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. We are dying." The message repeated, a loop of desperation echoing across the void. Nyla felt something tighten in her chest. 12 younglings. Children. Alien children, yes, but children all the same. She thought of her own niece back on Earth, just 7 years old, who loved to look at pictures of spaceships and dreamed of traveling to the stars. How far into the rift are they? She asked quietly. Danny pulled up the navigation charts, and his face went pale. "Deep, really deep. Commander, no ship has ever gone that far in and come back out. The radiation alone would cook us, Rosa added from the engineering station, her voice grim. "And that's assuming the gravitational fields don't tear us apart first. What about the Valorian military?" Tammy asked. "Can't they send a rescue ship?" Kevin checked the communication logs. 3 Valorian cruisers have already calculated the trajectory. They've declared rescue impossible. The Kolvani and Zentari have logged it as a loss. He paused, his voice heavy. Everyone has given up on them. Nyla stared at the navigation chart, at the swirling mass of danger that stood between her ship and those 37 people waiting to die. She thought about the risks, the very real possibility that she would be leading her crew to their deaths. She thought about turning away, completing their delivery, going home safe. And then she thought about those children huddled in the dark, wondering why no one was coming to save them. "Plot a course," she said. Danny's head snapped toward her. "Commander?" "Plot a course for the Star Weaver's position." "Best speed." "Nyla," Danny said, using her first name in a way that told her he was speaking as a friend, not an officer. "You know what you're asking. The rift will try to kill us every second we're inside it. We might not make it back." "I know," she said. She stood and faced her crew, looking each of them in the eye. "I won't order anyone to come with me. This is beyond what any of you signed up for. But I'm going because there are people out there who need help and no one else is coming. If you want to take the escape pods and wait for pickup, I understand. No judgment, no hard feelings." She waited. The bridge was silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Rosa was the first to speak. "My grandmother used to say that a person shows who they really are in moments like this." She smiled, though her eyes were serious. "I'd like to be someone worth being." "I'm in." Kevin nodded slowly. "I've flown through worse, probably. Maybe I'm in too." Tammy stood a little straighter. "Someone's going to need to patch you all up afterward." "Count me in." Danny sighed, but he was smiling. "You know I can't let you do something this stupid without me." "I'm in." Nyla felt a warmth spread through her chest, a pride in her crew that brought tears to her eyes. She blinked them away and nodded. "Then let's go save some people." The Dawnbreaker turned toward the Cygnus Rift and began to accelerate. Across the galaxy, observers watched with confusion as the small human cargo ship moved towards certain death. They did not understand what they were seeing. They would not understand for some time, but they would never forget it. The edge of the Cygnus Rift looked like a wound in space. Stars disappeared behind curtains of glowing gas and crackling energy. Strange lights pulsed in the distance, and the instruments on the Dawnbreaker began to flicker and complain as they approached. Nyla stood at the front of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, watching the chaos grow larger in the view screen. Somewhere in that swirling nightmare, 37 people were running out of time. "Entering the rift in 30 seconds, Kevin announced. His voice was calm, but his knuckles were wide on the controls. "All hands, brace for turbulence," Nyla said over the ship's communication system. "This is going to get rough." The Dawnbreaker crossed the boundary, and immediately the universe seemed to go mad. The ship shook so hard that Nyla had to grab her chair to stay on her feet. Warning lights flashed across every console. The view screen filled with colors that hurt to look at, and a deep groaning sound echoed through the hull as the metal strained against forces it was never designed to handle. "Radiation levels spiking," Rosa called out from engineering. "Shields are holding, but barely." "Gravitational anomaly ahead," Kevin said, his fingers dancing across the controls. "Adjusting course." The ship lurched sideways, throwing everyone against their restraints. Through the view screen, Nyla could see a patch of darkness that seemed to bend the light around it, a gravity well so powerful it was visibly warping space itself. Kevin steered them around it with inches to spare. "That was close," Danny muttered. There will be more, Kevin replied. Many more? He was right. The next 2 hours were the longest of Nyla's life. The rift seemed determined to destroy them. Radiation storms swept across their path, forcing Rosa to constantly reroute power to the shields. Gravitational fields appeared without warning, threatening to crush the ship or tear it apart. Debris from ancient ships that had died in this place struck their hull, each impact sending shudders through the vessel. Rosa worked without rest. She ran from console to console, her hands never still, patching failing systems and coaxing dying components back to life. Sweat soaked her uniform, and her voice grew hoarse from shouting commands to her engineering team. But she never stopped, never slowed, never gave up. Primary shield generator is overheating, she reported during a brief moment of calm. I can keep it running, but I need to reduce power to non-essential systems. Do it, Nyla said. Lights, heating, anything we can spare. The ship grew darker and colder. The crew wrapped themselves in emergency blankets and kept working by the glow of their consoles. No one complained. No one asked to turn back. Danny moved through the ship, checking on the crew, offering words of encouragement, making sure everyone had water and food, even if they did not feel like eating. He was everywhere at once, a steady presence that kept people calm when fear threatened to take over. How are you holding up? He asked Nyla quietly during one of his rounds. I'm terrified, she admitted. But I'd rather die trying than live knowing I didn't. Danny nodded. That's what I figured. That's why I followed you. The rift threw more dangers at them. A field of charged particles that made their electronics go haywire. A region where time itself seemed to flow strangely, where clocks ran backward and forward at random. A cloud of ice crystals that scraped against the hull like the fingers of ghosts. Kevin flew through it all with skill that bordered on impossible. His eyes never left the view screen. His hands never left the controls. He anticipated problems before they appeared, finding paths through the chaos that no computer could have calculated. It was not just piloting. It was art. Where did you learn to fly like this? Tammy asked him during a momentary lull. Kevin smiled slightly. Video games, mostly. And a lot of crashing in simulators. Turns out all that practice was worth something. They had been in the rift for 4 hours when the worst moment came. A radiation storm appeared directly in their path. Too large to avoid, and too intense to survive if they flew through it. The wall of deadly energy stretched across their entire field of vision, a glowing curtain of death that moved toward them with terrible speed. Options? Nyla asked, her voice tight. None, Kevin said. We can't go around it and we can't go through it. For a moment, silence filled the bridge. They had come so far, risked so much, and now it seemed the rift would claim them after all. Then Rosa spoke up, her voice excited. Wait, I have an idea. It's crazy, but it might work. Crazy is all we have left, Nyla said. What are you thinking? The shields can't handle that much radiation head-on, Rosa explained quickly. But if we angle them just right and redirect all available power to the forward projectors, we might be able to create a kind of tunnel through the storm. We would still take damage, but we might survive. How much damage? Danny asked. Rosa hesitated. A lot. And there's maybe a 30% chance the shields collapse entirely and we all die instantly. 30% chance of instant death, Kevin repeated. That means 70% chance of not instant death. I like those odds. Nyla looked at her crew. They were exhausted, scared, pushed to their limits. But in their eyes, she saw something else. Determination, courage, the stubborn human refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. Do it, she ordered. Rosa got to work, her fingers flying across the engineering console. Power was redirected, shield frequencies adjusted, emergency protocols engaged. The whole ship hummed with energy as everything they had was focused into a single defensive point. "Everyone hold on," Nyla said. "This is going to hurt." The Dawnbreaker plunged into the radiation storm. The ship screamed. Metal groaned and twisted. The temperature inside spiked despite the cold, as deadly radiation pounded against the shields. Warning alarms blared from every direction, and the lights flickered and died in the darkness. The crew held on. They gripped their consoles, their chairs, each other. They closed their eyes and hoped and prayed and refused to let go. The storm lasted for 3 minutes. It felt like 3 years, and then, suddenly, they were through. The alarms continued to wail, and smoke drifted through the corridors. But they were alive. Damaged, hurt, but alive. "Status report," Nyla coughed, waving smoke away from her face. "Hull integrity holding," Rosa reported, her voice shaking with relief and exhaustion. "Barely. We've got leaks in 3 compartments, but I can seal them. Life support is damaged but functional," Tammy added. "We'll need to ration oxygen for a while." "And our position?" Nyla asked. Kevin checked his instruments and then looked up with a tired smile. 2 hours from the Starweaver's location. "We're almost there." Nyla closed her eyes and let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for days. They had made it through the worst of the rift. Now they just had to complete the rescue. She opened her eyes and looked at her crew with fierce pride. "Let's go bring those people home." The Starweaver appeared on their sensors like a ghost. It drifted slowly in a pocket of calm space, surrounded on all sides by the dangers of the rift. Its elegant hull was scarred and broken, and thin streams of atmosphere leaked from a dozen wounds in its side. Emergency lights blinked weakly, the only sign that anyone aboard still lived. Nyla felt her heart clench at the sight. How are they still alive? "The Valorians built that ship well," Rosa said quietly. "But it won't last much longer. I'm reading critical failures across all major systems. Life support is almost gone. Life signs?" Tammy asked. Rosa checked her console. 37. All fading. "They've got maybe 90 minutes, if they're lucky." "Then we don't have time to be careful," Nyla said. "Kevin, bring us alongside for docking. Rosa, prepare emergency seals. Danny, Tammy, you're with me on the boarding party." The Dawnbreaker moved toward the wounded ship. The Valorian vessel was beautiful, even in its damaged state, all smooth curves and delicate lines. It looked like something an artist would create, a ship designed by a species that had known peace and safety for thousands of years. It had never been built to survive what the rift had done to it. "Docking is going to be tricky," Kevin warned. "Their docking port is damaged. I'll have to bring us in manually and hold position while you connect. Can you do it?" Kevin cracked his knuckles. "Watch me." The next few minutes were tense. Kevin eased the Dawnbreaker closer to the Starweaver, adjusting their position constantly to match the slow drift of the Valorian ship. Metal groaned as the 2 vessels came together, and for a terrible moment, it seemed like the connection would fail. Then the docking clamps engaged, and a green light appeared on the console. "We're locked," Kevin said with relief. "Go get them." Nyla grabbed her emergency kit and ran for the airlock. Danny and Tammy closed behind. Rosa met them there with a bag full of portable life support equipment and medical supplies. "The air over there is thin," Rosa warned. "Maybe 20 minutes of safe breathing. After that, you'll need masks." "Then we'll work fast," Nyla said. She pulled on her emergency suit and checked her gear. "Open the airlock." The door slid open, revealing a short connecting tunnel and then the interior of the Starweaver. The first thing Nyla noticed was the cold. It was freezing inside the Valorian ship, so cold that her breath formed clouds in front of her face. The second thing she noticed was the silence. No engine hum, No life support fans, nothing but the soft creak of a dying ship. They moved through the corridors quickly, following Rose's directions toward the emergency shelters where the life signs were concentrated. The walls were covered with beautiful artwork, paintings and sculptures that the Valorians had brought from their home world. Many of them had fallen during the crisis, shattered on the floor like broken dreams. The emergency shelter was a large room near the center of the ship, designed to be the most protected area during a disaster. The door was sealed, and through the small window, Nyla could see movement inside. "This is Commander Nyla Voss of the human cargo ship Dawnbreaker," she called out, her voice loud in the silence. "We're here to help. Please open the door." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the door slid open. The sight inside made Nyla's eyes sting with tears. The Valorians were huddled together for warmth, their bioluminescent skin barely glowing, their large dark eyes filled with exhaustion and fear. They were a beautiful species, tall and graceful, with skin that shifted through soft colors like the surface of a pearl. But now those colors were faded, dim, dying. The younglings were in the center of the group, protected by the bodies of the adults around them. They were small, delicate things, with transparent membranes on their heads that pulsed weakly with each breath. They looked up at the humans with huge, frightened eyes. An older Valorian stepped forward. Their robes were torn and stained, but they moved with dignity despite their obvious weakness. This was Counselor Thren, the senior scientist aboard the Starweaver. "You." Thren's voice was barely a whisper. "You came through the rift. That is not possible." "Apparently it is," Danny said with a gentle smile. "We're here to take you home." Thren stared at them as if trying to understand something beyond comprehension. "We sent the distress signal, knowing no one would come. The rift is death. Everyone knows this. Why would you risk everything for strangers?" Nyla knelt down so she could look into Thren's eyes directly. "Because you needed help," she said simply. "And we could give it. But we are not your people. We are not even your species. We have nothing to offer you, no way to repay." "Counselor," Nyla interrupted gently, "we didn't come here looking for payment. We came because it was the right thing to do. Now please, let us help you." Thren was silent for a long moment. Something passed across their face, an emotion that Nyla could not quite read. Then they bowed their head. "Thank you," they whispered. "Thank you." The evacuation began immediately. Tammy moved among the Valorians, checking vital signs and giving emergency treatment to those who needed it most. Danny organized the transfer, helping the weaker passengers through the connecting tunnel while guiding the others to follow. Nyla stayed in the shelter, making sure no one was left behind. The younglings were the hardest to move. They were cold and scared and did not understand what was happening. Some of them cried in frequencies that humans could not hear but could somehow feel. A vibration of pure distress that made Nyla's heart ache. One of the little ones, smaller than the others and shivering badly, reached up and grabbed Nyla's hand. Its skin was cold and smooth, and its grip was surprisingly strong. "I'm scared," it said in broken human language. Words probably learned from cultural exchange broadcasts. Nyla squeezed its hand gently. "I know, little one. But you're safe now. We're going to take you somewhere warm." She carried the youngling herself, cradling it against her chest where it could feel her heartbeat. By the time they reached the Dawnbreaker, the little one had stopped shivering. Rosa met them at the airlock, her face pale. "Commander, we have a problem. The additional mass from the passengers is going to stress our engines on the return trip. And our shields are already damaged. Can we make it?" Rosa hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. The math says no. The math doesn't account for stubbornness." Nyla looked back at the Valorians being helped aboard her ship. 37 people who had been waiting to die were now getting a second chance. She looked at the youngling still clinging to her uniform, its eyes already closing in exhausted sleep. "Then we'll be stubborn," she said. "Get everyone settled. We're going home." Rosa nodded and went to work. Danny guided the Valorians to every available space on the ship, setting up emergency bedding in corridors and cargo holds. Tammy established a medical station in the mess hall, treating the most critical cases while training Valorian volunteers to help with the others. Nyla returned to the bridge, the sleeping youngling still in her arms. Kevin looked at her with raised eyebrows. "New crew member?" he asked. "Temporary passenger," she replied, settling into her chair without disturbing the little one. "Take us out of here, Kevin. Take us home." The Dawnbreaker disconnected from the dying Starweaver and turned toward the exit of the rift. Behind them, the Valorian ship continued its slow drift into the darkness, finally abandoned to the void. But its passengers were safe, and that was all that mattered. The return journey through the Cygnus Rift was even harder than the way in. The Dawnbreaker was overloaded, its systems damaged, its crew exhausted. Every warning light on the bridge was blinking, and strange sounds echoed through the corridors as stressed metal complained about the abuse it was suffering. But they pressed on. Rosa had not slept in nearly 20 hours. She moved through the ship like a ghost, patching failing systems, rerouting power, and keeping the engines running through pure willpower. Her hands were burned from hot components, and her eyes were red from exhaustion, but she never stopped. "The primary cooling system is failing," she reported to Nyla over the communication system. "I can bypass it, but we'll lose some engine efficiency." "Do what you have to do," Nyla replied. "Just keep us moving." In the cargo holds and corridors, the Valorians huddled together, trying to stay warm. The Dawnbreaker's environmental systems were designed for humans, and the ship was far too cold for the alien passengers. Many of them shivered constantly, their bioluminescent skin flickering with distress. Danny noticed the problem immediately. Without being asked, he gathered the crew and organized a response. They gave up their jackets, their blankets, their personal heating units. Everything that could provide warmth was distributed to the Valorians. "Won't you be cold?" Counselor Thren asked, watching a human crew member hand over their only blanket to a shivering youngling. Danny shrugged, his breath visible in the chilly air. "We'll survive. Humans are adaptable. We evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill us. A little cold won't hurt us." The Valorians watched in amazement as the human crew walked through the freezing corridors in thin uniforms, smiling and offering comfort to passengers who were wrapped in layers of human warmth. It was such a small thing, giving up comfort for strangers, but to the Valorians, it was extraordinary. Tammy worked constantly in the medical station she had set up in the mess hall. Several of the Valorian passengers had been injured during the disaster, and others were suffering from the effects of exposure and stress. She treated them all with the same care and attention she would have given to her own family. One of the younglings had developed a fever. Its internal temperature had dropped too low during the crisis, and now its body was struggling to recover. Tammy stayed by its side for hours, monitoring its condition and adjusting treatment as needed. "Will it survive?" the youngling's parent asked, their voice trembling with fear. Tammy looked at the child, at its fragile form and fluttering membranes. She thought about all the things that could go wrong, all the ways this could end in tragedy. "I'm going to do everything I can," she said firmly, "and I don't give up easily." She stayed with the child through the night, and by morning, the fever had broken. The youngling opened its eyes and smiled, and its parent wept with relief. The crew of the Dawnbreaker gave up more than just warmth. They shared their food, even though it meant going hungry themselves. They gave up their bunks, sleeping on hard floors so the passengers could have something soft. They worked double shifts and triple shifts, pushing themselves to the point of collapse, because there was work to be done and lives depending on them. Kevin flew for 16 hours straight, his eyes never leaving the navigation display. When Danny brought him coffee and insisted he take a break, Kevin just shook his head. "Can't," he said simply. "If I leave the controls for even a minute, we might hit something. The autopilot isn't good enough for this. You'll collapse from exhaustion," Danny warned. Kevin smiled tiredly. "Then catch me when I fall. Until then, I fly." The Valorians watched all of this with growing confusion. In their experience, species looked out for themselves first. Help was offered with the expectation of return, favors granted in exchange for favors owed. This kind of selfless sacrifice was outside their understanding. Counselor Thren approached Nyla on the bridge, moving carefully through the crowded space. The human commander was studying the navigation charts, planning their route through the remaining dangers of the rift. "May I ask you something?" Thren said. Nyla looked up. "Of course." "Your crew. They give up their food, their warmth, their rest. They push themselves to the point of harm. Why do they do this?" Nyla considered the question for a moment. "Because it's what we do," she said finally. "It's who we are. But surely there is a limit. Surely at some point, self-preservation must take priority." Nyla shook her head slowly. "You would think so, wouldn't you? But humans are strange that way. We evolved as social creatures. We survived on our home world not because we were the strongest or the fastest, but because we worked together. We took care of each other. And somewhere along the way, that became part of our identity. It's not about logic or calculation. It's about what it means to be human." Thren was silent for a long moment, absorbing her words. "Your species is very young," they said finally. "You have not seen the wars we have seen, the betrayals, the broken promises. You still believe in things that older species have forgotten." "Maybe," Nyla agreed. "Or maybe we just refuse to stop believing in them." They were halfway through the return journey when the crisis hit. A radiation spike, larger than anything they had encountered before, swept across their path. The shields, already damaged from the journey in, could not handle the intensity. For 17 seconds, deadly radiation flooded through the ship. Alarms screamed. Crew members scrambled for cover. In the cargo hold where most of the Valorian younglings were sheltered, Danny made a split-second decision. He threw himself over 2 of the smallest younglings, covering them with his body as the radiation swept through the compartment. He felt the burn, felt the cells in his body screaming in protest, but he did not move. He stayed in place, shielding the children with his own flesh and bone. When the emergency systems finally kicked in and the radiation cleared, Danny was still there. His skin was red and blistered, and his hands were shaking, but the younglings beneath him were unharmed. "Why?" one of them asked in a small voice, looking up at the injured human. "Why did you do that?" Danny smiled, though the expression was tight with pain. "Because you're just kids," he said. "And kids deserve to grow up." Tammy reached him minutes later, her face pale with concern. She ran a medical scanner over his body, and her expression grew more serious with each reading. "You've taken a significant dose," she said quietly. "The damage is treatable, but there will be consequences. Your lifespan, Danny. You've probably lost years." Danny looked at the 2 younglings who were now clinging to a Valorian adult, their eyes still fixed on him with something like wonder. "Worth it?" he said simply. The news spread through the ship quickly. A human had shortened his own life to save alien children. To the Valorians, it was almost impossible to comprehend. They gathered in small groups, talking quietly, trying to understand what they had witnessed. Counselor Thren came to see Danny in the medical bay, where Tammy was treating his burns. The old Valorian stood in the doorway for a long moment, simply watching. "You are a strange species," Thren said finally. "In all my years and all my travels, I have never seen anything like what you have done here today." Danny looked up, his face tired but peaceful. "We're not special," he said. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Thren replied, their voice firm. "They would not. That is precisely what makes you remarkable." The Dawnbreaker continued its journey through the rift, battered and damaged, but still flying. Behind them, the worst of the chaos fell away. Ahead, the stars of normal space began to appear through the thinning clouds of energy. They were almost home. The Dawnbreaker emerged from the Cygnus Rift, looking like a ship that had fought a war and barely survived. Its hull was scorched and scarred, with holes patched by emergency sealant and whole sections held together by nothing more than hope and determination. Smoke drifted from a dozen vents, and the engine made sounds that Rosa Martinez had never heard before and never wanted to hear again. But it was flying, and everyone aboard was alive. News of the rescue had already spread across the galaxy. The moment the Dawnbreaker's signal appeared on the edge of the rift, communication networks lit up with messages of shock and disbelief. A human cargo ship had done what 3 military cruisers had declared impossible. A crew of 5 had saved 37 lives from certain death in the most dangerous region of known space. The Valorian government sent an escort of their finest ships to guide the Dawnbreaker to safety. The Kovani Trade Federation offered free repairs at any of their stations. The Zentari Collective broadcast prayers of thanks to every world in their network. Species that had never paid attention to humanity suddenly wanted to know everything about them. But aboard the Dawnbreaker, the crew was too tired to care about fame. Kevin finally allowed himself to be relieved at the controls, collapsing into sleep the moment someone else took his seat. Rosa shut down non-essential systems and simply sat on the floor of the engine room, too exhausted to move. Tammy continued treating patients, but had to be reminded to eat and drink by the very people she was caring for. Nyla stood on the bridge, watching the escort ships form a protective formation around her battered vessel. The Valorian youngling she had carried from the Starweaver was still following her everywhere, refusing to leave her side. She had learned that its name was something close to Myra in human pronunciation, and that it had lost its parents in the disaster that crippled the Starweaver. "Where will I go?" Mira asked, looking up at Nyla with those huge dark eyes. "My family is gone." Nyla knelt down and took the child's small hands in her own. "You'll go home to your people," she said gently, "and they'll take care of you. But you can always come visit me if you want. You'll always be welcome on my ship." Myra threw thin arms around Nyla's neck and held on tight. Nyla hugged the child back, feeling tears prick at her eyes. 3 months later, Counselor Thren stood before the Galactic Council. The great amphitheater was filled with representatives from over 1,000 species. They came from worlds of ice and fire, from gas giants and ocean planets, from civilizations that had traveled the stars since before humanity's ancestors had learned to walk upright. This was the heart of galactic civilization, where the fate of nations was decided and the laws of the universe were written. Thren had never felt so small, and yet they had never felt more certain of what they needed to say. "Thank you for allowing me to address this assembly," Thren began, their voice carrying across the vast space. "I come before you not as a diplomat or a scientist, but as a witness. I witness something that I believe every being in this galaxy needs to understand." The council waited in respectful silence. 3 months ago, my ship was lost in the Cygnus Rift. We've given up hope. Every calculation said that rescue was impossible. Every power in the galaxy declared us dead. Thren paused, letting the words sink in. But a small human cargo ship heard our distress call, and they came for us. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Everyone had heard the story by now, but hearing it from Thren directly was different. They came through radiation storms that should have killed them. They flew through gravitational fields that should have torn their ship apart. They pushed their bodies in their vessel to the breaking point, and then pushed further. When I asked their commander why she would risk so much for strangers, do you know what she said? Thren's voice grew stronger. She said, "Because you needed help," as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. As if any other response were unthinkable. Thren looked out at the assembled representatives, seeing surprise and confusion on many faces. I have lived for over 300 years. I have studied civilizations across this galaxy. I have seen great empires rise and fall, watched species achieve wonders and commit horrors. In all that time, I thought I understood how the universe worked. Strength meant military power. Success meant economic dominance. Survival meant looking out for your own kind first and others never. They shook their heads slowly. The humans have shown me that I was wrong. True strength is not measured in weapons or wealth. It is measured in what a species will sacrifice for others. It is measured in the ability to look at a stranger in need and see not an alien, not a burden, not a calculation of costs and benefits, but a person worth saving. Thren's voice rang through the chamber. A human crew member shortened his own life to shield our children from radiation. He gave up years of his existence for younglings he had never met. When I asked him why, he said, "Because kids deserve to grow up." His logic was that simple. His heart was that pure. The council was completely silent now. For 10,000 years, we have ranked species by their capacity to threaten or benefit us. We have built alliances based on mutual gain and treaties based on shared enemies. But we have missed something essential. We have forgotten that civilization is not just about survival. It is about what we choose to do with our survival. It is about who we become when no one is forcing us to be kind. Thren straightened, their presence suddenly commanding. The humans are a young species. They have made mistakes, as all species do. They fight among themselves. They struggle with their own demons. They are far from perfect. But when they heard a cry for help from the darkness, they did not calculate the odds. They did not weigh the costs. They simply came. And they kept coming until everyone was safe. They looked directly at the senior representatives in the front rows. I submit to this council that we have been measuring strength incorrectly. And I submit that the humans, for all their youth and imperfection, may be among the strongest of us all. The speech ended. For a long moment, silence filled the amphitheater. Then, slowly, someone began to applaud. The sound spread, growing louder and stronger until the entire assembly was on its feet, acknowledging a truth that many of them had never considered before. Far away, aboard the Dawnbreaker, life had returned to something like normal. The ship had been repaired. Better than new in some places, thanks to the generous offers of help from across the galaxy. The crew had recovered from their injuries, though Danny would carry scars for the rest of his life. They had received medals and honors and offers of wealth and fame, most of which they politely declined. Nyla stood on the bridge, watching the stars drift past as they headed toward their next cargo run. Just another job, just another journey across the void. Kevin was at the controls, humming softly to himself. Rosa was in engineering, probably talking to the engines the way she always did. Danny was somewhere below decks, training new crew members who had begged to serve on the famous Dawnbreaker. Tammy was in the medical bay, preparing for whatever the universe might throw at them next. And on Nyla's desk sat a small figurine. A gift from Myra. It was a Valorian symbol of gratitude, carved from crystal that glowed with soft inner light. Myra had made it herself, working for weeks to get every detail right. The inscription on the base read, in careful human letters, for the ones who came when no one else would. Nyla picked it up sometimes. when the nights were long and the stars seemed very far away. She held it in her hands and remembered those terrible hours in the rift. Remembered the fear and the pain and the desperate hope that they would make it through. She remembered Myra's small hand in hers, and Danny throwing himself over those children, and Rosa keeping the ship alive through sheer stubborn brilliance. She remembered her crew, her family, choosing to fly into darkness because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy was old, and it had seen many things, but it had never seen anything quite like humanity. And somewhere out in the vast ocean of stars, other ships were changing course. Other crews were answering distress calls they might have ignored before. Other species were learning that strength could mean something more than power. The Dawnbreaker flew on, carrying its crew toward new adventures and new horizons. Behind them, the light of Myra's gift glowed softly in the darkness, and ahead of them, the future waited, full of possibility and hope.